and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I am incredibly excited to be joined by LaFawn Davis. Now, LaFawn is actually Vice President for Diversity, Inclusion and Belonging at Indeed.com. She was 2019's SFBT Most Influential Women in Business, and she has had a plethora of experience. She's recognized nationally and internationally with over a decade's worth of experience in breaking down broad-reaching organizational goals into actionable and achievable steps. She's worked for some globally recognized organizations from Google through to Yahoo, eBay, PayPal, and does a lot of public speaking and thought leadership. So delighted to have her here with us today. Welcome to the show, LaFawn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you so much, LaFawn. And tell us, for our listeners who perhaps haven't had the chance to get to know you personally, give us a little summary of how you came to be where you are today, some of the key projects perhaps you are working on, and also where you are, where you're speaking from, because of course you aren't from the UK, and many of our listeners are both American and worldwide, but a lot come from the UK. So
yes. So I thank you so much for that. I am actually in Oakland, California, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And I'm at home because we are on full lockdown in California due to COVID-19. And I normally, when I introduce myself to, new listeners and listeners who don't know me, I like to start off with intersectionality. And for those that don't know what intersectionality means, it just means we all have layers. So none of us are a binary identity. No one's just a woman or a man. So I am Black, I am queer, I am a woman, I am a mother, I'm a certain age. And
you look very young and you look fabulous, by the way. For those who
Thank
can't
you.
see this video, LaFawn looks amazing. So anyway, I will shut up now and let you continue, LaFawn.
That is so sweet. The reason that matters is it actually really helps me do my job well. I have a lot of different lenses when I think about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Intersectionality is really important to me because that means that different communities can work together and come together and build that sense of belonging, which is really about community. I have been in the space for about 15 years, mostly in tech, and it's just a really interesting time. With COVID-19, it is, I think, changed the way that we have all had to work worldwide. This is a global issue. And the nice thing I think about it is that it's kind of the great equalizer. So now that the majority of us are working from home or doing kind of virtually connecting, it's created a space where we have to look at inclusion and belonging a little bit differently. And so that's why it's been a bit of a pivot in this role to help build a more diverse and inclusive company, but also create a space where people feel like they belong.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And of course, you mentioned there COVID-19, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about that. Because of course, it's a very difficult time for individuals, but like you said, that actually all clouds have got silver linings. And this is, as you so beautifully said, that kind of an equalizer, and it's actually almost harnessing this power of being able to bring together people globally in this virtual environment. So I wonder, could you, before we kind of get into the various subjects for today's podcast, give us a little bit of a, almost a synopsis of some of the wonderful things that you are doing at Indeed with regards to D&I and B, but also with how the company has managed this, unbelievable time that we are facing right now.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. So I'm actually really, really proud to be at Indeed right now. We have been speaking to employees since January about COVID-19, which is not necessarily the norm for most companies. A lot of companies just started talking about it with employees. We're truly a global company. We have offices everywhere. And so in keeping our employees in mind, it's always been around their safety. Indeed's a very employee-first company. And so we wanted to make sure that our employees were safe. We made the decision as a company to go full work from home well before other places were shelter in place or had shelter in place orders. So we've been communicating with employees, sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes on a weekly basis, about what's going on in their country and then also globally. The things that they should do, we always rely on the CDC advice, the advice from the World Health Organization, normal things like wash your hands, and if you feel sick, make sure that you do these things, but also here's how we're handling it as a company. And I think in absence of communication, there's fear. And I think Indeed has done a really great job of communicating consistently so that employees know what's happening and that we're making the right choices for them. We have what's called employee resource groups. We call them IRGs, which is inclusion resource groups. And they have been phenomenal. We have IRGs around women, around kind of ethnic minorities like Asian, Black, Latinx. We have Access Indeed, which is around kind of mental health and people with disabilities, things of that nature. We have one that's just starting for parents and caregivers. And we're finding that this space in particular is really hitting parents and caregivers pretty hard right now. There are some people that are working from home, and they also have to be teachers, right? Because children are not in school. And so, you might see children running around in the background. You might see pets, dogs and cats jumping around. And it's, I think, made people more human, right? Because go ahead.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. And I think that is a really wonderful thing, is it's almost a window into the soul of what is happening within people's personal lives. And like you say, I've seen, saw a cockapoo actually running across the screen this morning. And it was so lovely. And actually I was there going kind of, oh my God, so cute. Yeah. And I've just got a puppy. So, so the puppy's been around. And I think what's really lovely is actually people aren't necessarily talking business first, because look, let's face it right now, business is not as usual, and frankly, it is, the lines are blurring more and more so when you say that your caregiver and your parental IRG is absolutely kind of inundated, I'm completely not surprised, because the line where the two meet is almost non-existent right now, frankly. But I can tell how much of a positive person you are just from speaking with you, and I can see that in a way this is just a wonderful opportunity, because people are sharing what they're doing in their personal lives, they're having conversations that they wouldn't have had beforehand. They're almost being forced into a situation, not through their willing, but through what is happening with COVID-19, that they have to be in this very different environment. And what's come out of the other end, I think not only will change the face of working forever, but hopefully it will truly bring us more closely together when it comes to inclusivity.
Absolutely. It's creating bonds that may have not been there before. As you mentioned, business as usual sometimes is going in the office, doing your job. You might say hi, you might talk to the people around you, but this is a space where there are people we didn't even know were parents that we now know are parents. Our leaders are doing a great job of that. Our COO might start a global Q&A with his daughter on his lap, right? Our CEO might tell a story of, okay, we're sheltering in place, and there have been moments where my family has needed a timeout, right? We're all in this space together and kind of confined. And so it's changing the way that people connect with each other. They're becoming just very human with each other. So the connection seems to actually be deeper now than when we were all in kind of different physical locations.
I absolutely love this. And obviously, Indeed has got such a big and globally recognized name. I wonder, with this whole piece around humanity and the normalization of the fact that you talk so openly about the CEO having his daughter on his lap, which is just wonderful, and this over communication, which I genuinely believe is something we need to do now. Leaders that are really stepping up to the plate are the ones that are communicating every single day, be it about the same thing over and over again and on repetition, whatever. It's that amount of communication. But do you think that's been one of the reasons reasons that business has been so successful, because it's been around for such a long time now. This really is a globally recognized name, and even more so than some of the large digital businesses that I know and work with, whom I won't mention now, but they are very large organizations that people just don't know them in the household. They say, oh, who is, specific media businesses or whatever. Everyone does know Indeed, and they certainly know on this side of the pond as well. So talk to me about why you think the business has been so successful, and clearly over anticipating in times of need, which is just amazing that you're preparing since January. I think we lots of businesses have only just started thinking about it right now.
Yes, absolutely. So, Indeed has been around for 15 years and actually 12 years in the UK. And I honestly think the reason that we're so well known is because of our mission. So our mission is we help people get jobs. It always has been and always will be. And even in this space, we have kind of turned around our strategy to create a space where we're saying we're here to help. Right? So even if you go to indeed.com/here to help, you're going to see lots of resources for people that are newly working from home. Mind you, not everybody was ready to do that. Not everybody has a home office or a space that's okay for them. We have a guide for parents, things that they should maybe think about as they're working from home with children. We have guides for people who are newly unemployed, resources by state, by country. And so I think it's because our mission is so core to who we are, that is why people know us in this space. It's very simple. We want to make sure that a job seeker can get a job. It sounds like almost too simple, but everything really drives towards that core.
But the most simple things are often the most powerful, and everyone knows Indeed, of course, for helping. And I think you made that very clear. We help people get jobs, and in a time of right now, I'm sure you're absolutely inundated with these kind of questions about unemployment. And again, would be remiss for me not to ask the question around guides for the unemployed, or those who are unfortunately really suffering, be it through furloughing or kind of redundancies and stuff. But what advice would you give from Indeed, and also personally, about those that are really suffering anxiety or have just been made unfortunately redundant due to COVID-19 or other factors?
Yeah, this is a very tough time, right? And personally, my advice to folks is be kind to yourself. Right? It is a time of anxiety. It is a time of stress. You may be the breadwinner in your home. You may be the only one supporting yourself. So this is a really tough time. And I think a lot of companies are in a space of trying to figure it out with the economic crisis that is actually starting to happen. And so my personal advice is definitely be kind to yourself. The resources that I mentioned for people who are displaced right now or out of work, it is at indeed.com/here to help. You can see a lot of resources on that, along with advice on finding new roles during this time, whether it's finding, place in a physical company or finding remote work. Those are the things that people have to do right now, along with, kind of trying to really wait and see where things shake out. This is the third economic crisis of my adult life. And if anything, I know that we always come back, right? We always come back, but it is going to be painful along the way. So there's a lot of kind of resources that we have on Indeed. There's a lot of advice on how to register for, like in the UK, universal credit if they need that. There are resources on how to apply for unemployment in other places. And I think those are the things that people want to do right now. They're scared, right? They're scared, and understandably so.
Thank you so much. That's really, really wonderful advice and very, very helpful. And what I will do, and don't worry if you're trying to scribble this down, I put all of the show notes into our summary at the end of today's show. So don't worry, we will repeat all of this in case you're listening thinking, right, I definitely need to get onto Indeed here to help. And if you don't mind me kind of rewinding the clock back a little bit, LaFawn, because I know we are talking so much and it's really, really helpful advice around what we can do during these challenging times. But I noticed, having done a lot of research about your background, is you have got such an inspirational and unique background about how you came to be in what is a very influential position, and obviously being recognized for many different awards. I wonder whether you might be able to share a little, if you don't mind, of course, with our listeners, you know, some of the pieces that have really affected you personally and have almost pushed you on to the senior echelons that you exist within right now, because there's many individuals that I engage with on a day-to-day basis, whether it be people writing in from the podcast, people are writing in about something they've read in the book or whatever, who say, you know, I might be embarking on my career or midway through my career, and you know, I'm really finding it difficult as a minority or what feels to be an outsider almost. And I wonder, have you experienced those feelings? You talk so articulately about intersectionality and the different facets of your personality, but were there poignant moments in your life where I don't know, where you came out, or you suffered challenge or discrimination or anything like this that really made you who you are? Because I'd love to share some glimmers of wisdom with our network.
Yes, absolutely. I'd be more than happy to. When I started my career in diversity inclusion, I had never worked for a company where diversity inclusion was important. I think about how I grew up, right? And my parents were in the Bay Area, Berkeley, Oakland. A lot of the civil rights stuff was happening then. I had parents who educated us all the time. I mean, we played like Black History Month board games and right, read comic books about our history. And I think all of that was preparing me in ways that I didn't know to enter the space that I didn't know existed. So I actually started my career off in like more operations, and started off in this space as actually an ERG leader. So I started off as for the Black Googlers Network, and really was like, wow, I'm passionate about this. I was doing my core job in operations, but was like, this is amazing, and we can make change and we can make a difference. And so just through that kind of excitement, I started to push through and created a role for myself within the HR organization. And it was really around this space of trying to figure it out, because it was all new, especially in tech. And that's where I started, but the barriers came mostly from myself. So imposter syndrome, I talk a lot about this. It's crippling. It's when your voice tells yourself they're going to figure out you don't know what you're doing, right? They're going to know that you don't actually have this experience, or that you're not as great as these other people over here. And that self-doubt can actually cripple you from making change and from growing in your career. And so I think some of the things that really helped me with that were, I started to surround myself with people who had a voice louder than that little voice in my head. It's kind of like having a board of directors. I call them my squad, but it is people that are around me that are in different places. Maybe they're in the same kind of role. Maybe they're, where I want to be as far as executive or C-level. But these are people who believe in me, even when I don't believe in myself. And so when those voices are louder, you start to recognize, I am actually ready for this. I am actually good at this. I do have the experience and the background. And I was made for this. And you start to walk into your purpose a lot more when you push past imposter syndrome.
I love that. And you're right, it so does start from within. And I love how you so honestly just say that is the biggest barrier. And I completely concur. I think it's the thing that can actually hinder us the most. It's very easy to kind of blame external factors, especially if you are in a minority. I think you're used to perhaps being treated in a certain way or perceived being treated in a certain way. And I personally relate to it a huge amount. When so I was adopted. I'm Chinese, as you can probably tell, but I was adopted by white British parents. And whilst I remember as a young child fitting in Hong Kong in the very international schools, coming to the UK into a very middle class white British town, which I'm not sure if you know, but it's in North Yorkshire, basically, a place called Harrogate. There was literally no Chinese children at all. And I suddenly became aware of being very, very different. And so I spent this huge amount of energy trying to fit in with everyone else. And then eventually as it sounds, as you did, have this almost light bulb moment where it's like, hang on a minute, can I embrace being different?
Right.
And can I embrace my true self? But there are, as you have also said, there's many times where you kind of walk into a room, and often within, my other role, which is working with an exec search, work into a boardroom full of middle-aged white guys. Not that I don't
Hmm.
love middle-aged white guys, but you could become very aware of your physical differences almost, and it is
Absolutely.
quite difficult to overcome that. And I guess for those who are listening in, like our younger selves perhaps, or others who are working their way up that corporate ladder,
Yeah.
thinking, well, and it's easy to say that when you've kind of, you've made it and you are successful, etc. But are there any kind of little tools and tips, or even allyships that those listening in can start to consider, that might help give them that inner self-belief and confidence that they so desperately need to harness?
Absolutely, absolutely. And so the experience that you talked about definitely have been there, right? When you walk in a room and you're the only one that looks like you, and that is called being othered. You recognize right away that there is something different about you than everybody else in the room, and they do too.
Mhm.
And so that can be kind of intimidating when you walk in a room that looks the same and you're the outlier. And there's all these kind of biases that you're worried may be in other people's minds, right? Are they looking at me in a particular way because I'm Black, because I'm a woman? What is that saying to them? Are they going to treat me differently? And sometimes there's that fear before you even engage with anyone, to understand, because of our life experience. And so I often will have conversation with these middle-aged white men who are afraid to have that experience for themselves. So when I talk about being an ally, right? Being an ally to me means supporting someone who's not like you. That's being an ally. So I am a straight ally. I'm a white ally. I'm a male ally. I'm an ally of anybody that's not like me, right? And so I tend to frame that for them. And so there was one manager that came to me who said, when I walk in a room, uh, and I'm the only one that looks like me, it's a little uncomfortable, and I don't know, if I should engage, and I'm a little worried. And I said, well, welcome, because that is what we feel like every single day. Walk into that, feel what that feels like, because that's how other people feel, and then connect, because we all have something in common. Whether you have the same gender, the same ethnicity, or anything else, we all have a human connection. So once you feel what you feel, then step through it, because there's always a connection that you have with other people. I would give that advice on both sides, for those who are feeling othered and for those who are looking to be allies. And even when I talk about allyship, I like to take it a step further into advocacy, because allyship has come to mean just, I'm going to support from over here and I don't want bad things to happen. But advocacy is active. I am actually going to do something for you if I see you being treated wrong, or I am actually going to say something and speak up when I see something's not okay. And then I take that even further into being an accomplice. Now that sounds like it has like a breaking and entering meaning, but
I love it though. I love it though.
but I think that that's necessary to break down the historical systems of oppression that have been put into place, that maybe the people today haven't necessarily put into place, but they are actively enjoying those systems through privilege. And so it's kind of like, I want people to be an ally, but I want them to even go further than that, to be actively working to make sure that we have equity across the board.
Some really fantastic nuggets of wisdom there, and I love how you took it through all of those different phases there, into the advocacy and also being an accomplice. I love that. I was kind of picturing cops and robbers when you were
Right?
talking about that, which is how I will now remember it. But I absolutely love that, and on your point of breaking down that historical oppression, and I get quite a few challenges actually on this very very specific topic, because I think people, I don't know, almost sometimes, and I am not tarring everyone with this brush, but what I am saying is that, those that live in the present are not necessarily responsible for that. And I think their defensiveness
Yes.
almost is, well, it's
Hmm.
nothing to do with me. And it is, it can be quite challenging. It can be quite
Yes.
quite exhausting, I think, sometimes actually going through that explanation of, and so where you can relate things to real life tangible examples, you can make it simple, like we did right at the beginning, where it's just about what's side and that humanistic piece, and then you go into kind of educating people about what did happen before and why these these mindsets and thought processes are in place, because it is historical. And I think there's a lot of people maybe who naively don't necessarily know that. It's not their fault. We need to make that clear.
Yes.
It's not their fault, but this is something that needs to be understood for the good of humanity, and enabling us to be able to drive forward together.
Absolutely. It's, recognizing one's privilege can be painful, right? Because privilege actually means that you didn't do the things that put you in that position of privilege. If your parents were in a position to pay for your education, that's great. That's privilege. Everyone doesn't have those opportunities. If you come from a wealthy family, wealthy background, if you had benefits growing up so you can go to the doctor whenever you wanted, there's certain things that are actually a part of privilege, and people don't recognize those things because they didn't actually actively create those things, right? And so the same things with some of this historical systems of oppression that have been put into place. They may not have built those things, but they actually do get to enjoy the privilege, right, of being in that space. So it is sometimes painful because people do get defensive. Well, I didn't do it. You're right, you didn't do it, but you do actively enjoy that space. And I don't mean enjoy as in the happy place. I mean, you get to move through life without those barriers and obstacles in your way because of what has been built for you. And so getting people to the point of being an accomplice to say, I recognize my privilege. I didn't create it, but I do maintain it by not recognizing my privilege, and getting them to a place where they have to break it down. Because the reality is, people that are in a position of being underrepresented, whether that's minorities, whether that's women in certain spaces, or whatever the case may be, they actually do not have the power to make the change. It has to be the people that are in power, the people that are the majority, to actually break down those systems.
Exactly. Hence, there is no point then alienating the very individuals who are in those positions. We must be holistic, and we must not single out very well. Yes, we have our ERGs, but singling out specifics where you are at the point where you are alienating, say the middle-aged white man who is in the vast majority of seats of power. Let's just be honest about it.
Yes.
There is no point doing that. And again, to revert back to your earlier points of simplicity, which I think is absolutely key in such a digitally often cluttered almost world, is a piece there actually about privilege. And if you break it down to those like simple micro modules almost, and carry out exercises like, which I'm sure you've done, the privilege walk with various executives, and I've done this many a time in the various workshops that we do, and every single time there is a different result. And we've even had tears in some of the sessions, because individuals genuinely just don't see it. And it touches me so much and brings a tear to my eye when I see those who are at the front of the room and they just genuinely did not realize. And that is just being, bless them, a naivety on their part. And, all of us enjoy certain aspects of privilege, and all of us have got certain limitations, whether it be with our self-confidence, whether it be with something which is more external. But, books in the house, for example, really tiny things like that, paid education, you say, books in the house, getting school meals, which were, paid for, lots and lots of pieces like that, which really do make up, whether we have, had a step up or not. And so it really is more holistically about leveling the playing field and not being scared of using words like privilege, which I think to many people, they want to shy away from things like that because it feels uncomfortable, right?
Yes, it is an uncomfortable conversation when you talk about things like privilege, or even when you talk about fragility. So fragility is that space where people don't want to talk about it, or they might automatically just start crying before you actually get to the root of it. It is a defense mechanism because it works, right? If you're talking to someone and they're like, I didn't know it, I'm so sorry. And you're okay, hold on, right? But that doesn't actually help them push through to understanding. And it's almost taking it, when we take it into a business context, talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. Right? So it's getting them to understand, if you take it out of the personal aspect and look at it that way, then that is bringing them into the opportunity to really help people create that space of equity, removing bias, removing barriers, and really understanding it there, as opposed to you did something bad and you're wrong as a person. It's more around understanding it from the macro level so they can get past the fragility to talk about their own privilege.
Absolutely, the bird's eye view and more holistically. And if you pluck yourself out of that situation, it's much easier to diagnose almost. And
Yes.
LaFawn, I'm realizing, because I'm getting so into this conversation, I'm realizing the time and how incredibly busy you are. And so before we run out of time for today's show, what I'd really love to do is just go into a lightning round, if that's okay with you. And
Sure.
and for those who listen to the show, I'm sure you know what is coming. It's a couple of kind of quick fire questions where LaFawn, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to answer each one. But
Okay.
first and foremost, what does, again, it's classic, what does diversity, inclusion, and belonging mean to you personally?
So diversity, inclusion, and belonging means, what that means to me is really about removing bias and barriers. So the bias around, stereotypes of how people are, like I said, talent is evenly distributed, opportunity is not, and the barriers to entry. Because I truly believe that if we actually create spaces where there aren't those barriers, more people would be able to enter the workforce, the tech industry, and change the world. And so that's what diversity inclusion means to me. Belonging is about community. So that is really about the fact that we are a human connection, we're one space, and how do we create those moments where we can connect?
Wonderful, great answer, thank you. And again, another quite big question actually, but I wonder, what would you say has been your secret to success to date?
Mm. So I think my secret to success, honestly, is that I am an influencer. I was just saying someone to the other day, I know that I'm a tone changer. When I'm in the room, I have an ability to change the conversation to be more actionable and more positive. You mentioned my positive spirit. I absolutely am. I often say I can run around with sprinkles and rainbows and unicorn dust, but it's really a person's day-to-day that matters. And so how can I influence change to occur for others when I'm not there? And I think that is actually what's made me pretty influential to be able to make those spaces.
Thank you so much. And of course, being an influencer, I think in this modern day world, we all now know that term. It is an absolute household term. But it's very, very, important, especially in the digital world, though, because there is a lot of negativity that can go around. So where we can have really abundantly positive individuals who've got that wonderful effect where you go away
Mm.
smiling, kind of bouncing off, is great. And you clearly have got that. So thank you. And second to last question here, I wonder who has been kind of some of the biggest influences in your life,
Mm.
or kind of, those that have really inspired you, or maybe even made you who you are today, be it personally, be it professionally.
Absolutely. So as I get older, my parents have been such an influence on me. My father was an executive growing up, and I wanted to be CEO of 7 companies when I was growing up. Don't ask me how that was going to work, but that was my
I
that was
love
my
it.
dream. It wasn't actually, the very traditional ways that women should or should not be. I was never discouraged from going into anything. And then my mother, who's super strong, she's a strong woman, and the way that I actually influence comes from her, because she has kind of a quiet but yet powerful way of speaking to people that makes you lean in and really listen. So over time, I've really started to notice how much my parents influenced who I am today. I had a phenomenal, and still have a phenomenal, mentor, and her name is Stacy Brown Philpott. She's actually the CEO of TaskRabbit now, but we started at Google together. And she was an operations manager, and I was in operations, and she became the leader of the Black Googlers Network. And she mentored me along the way, even through all of the rest of my companies. She is super smart and also has an incredible way of speaking. You just want to know everything she has to say, kind of like writing it down every moment. And the way that she leads has been an absolute example for me. So I would say that those folks top of mind, but there's been a lot of people along the way, including the squad that I mentioned earlier, who really have influenced how I work.
Great answer. And I love the piece there about your mum, because I think it's almost easy to think of the stereotypical booming, loud, influential CEO, but actually I love that one of your biggest inspirations has actually been your mother, who actually had that quiet confidence and that ability to influence, maybe move around the pieces of the
Mhm.
chessboard without anyone realizing almost. And I love that. It's kind of ninja. I love it.
Yeah.
Finally, because I'm aware that we're talking well over here, and actually I'm already thinking, God, we could do another podcast straight with some of the stuff here. But finally, LaFawn, I wonder if you could go back a number of years ago, and if you could actually give advice to the young LaFawn who had this idea of
Mm.
wanting to be CEO of 7 organizations, and actually really not knowing what was ahead in her journey. Or indeed, if there is anyone who is listening in who's about to embark on the journey that you are or others would, what would you say to the young LaFawn?
Yeah. So what I would say to the young LaFawn is listen to your voice. Um, it sounds really simple, but I think I struggled a lot with confidence, with understanding who I really was, going after the things I was passionate about, and away from what path might have traditionally been set out for me. It was hard for me to push through that. I think, especially earlier on when I was younger, understanding what I could or could not do, really having society's view of who I should be. And so if I could talk to myself, I would say none of that matters. You need to create your own path. You are your own person, and you are going to do things to change the world.
That is so inspirational and very motivational. Thank you so much, LaFawn, for being here with us today. I really, really
Thank you so much
appreciate
for having
it.
me.
You're so welcome. And as usual, I will do my very brief synopsis, although there's so many things that I want to squeeze in, which I won't do. But some of the things that really stood out to me are the importance and the benefits of ERGs, or IRGs as you call them. If you are an organization, or you're listening in and you don't have ERGs in place, do make sure you have a little bit of research and look that up. If you have got ERGs or IRGs in place, really consider the intersectionality and the benefits of actually weaving together all those different communities, because as LaFawn has
Mhm.
said, each of us represents a very different and very unique set of different identities. And so for us to be able to tap into those and not be siloed into one specific area is very, very important indeed. And remember, you are powerful. I think, really what LaFawn has said is an absolute testament to being hardworking and being resilient. If you have that belief, do not let your own mind hold you back in what you can possibly do. And if you are worried, or if you are lacking in that confidence, surround yourself by positive people. Energy is a very, very unique thing. And, it's so funny when I meet lots of inspirational individuals on this podcast show, and in day-to-day life like LaFawn, I can feel the energy and I can feel the positivity, which is almost vibrating off me right now. If you're to surround yourself in difficult times, especially right now during COVID-19, with positive individuals like LaFawn, like your friends, like your family, you can draw inspiration from many different places. Actually, you'll start to find that those people who really love you will give you that confidence so that you can then go out there and find that yourself. And finally, because I could really wrap it on quite a lot about lots of the things that I've learned today, but I love the final kind of parting words of wisdom there about creating your own path. Don't worry about society's view. Don't worry, in fact, about what people think about you. Find your own voice, find your own heart, and listen to the people and yourself, because that's really all that matters. So I shall leave you with that today. Of course, everything will be on the show notes. You can visit www.indeed.com/here to help. Plenty of wonderful advice, inspiration, and some really useful key points about how to get through what is a very difficult time that we are all going through today. As usual, the show notes will be on our website, www.dialglobal.org/podcast. We'll make sure everything goes down in there. But if you've got any questions, or indeed if you've been affected by anything at all on today's show, please do feel free to reach out to myself or the team, or indeed LaFawn, who is on LinkedIn. She is very busy, so if there's any questions you want to send this way, do bear with her. It is a difficult and very unprecedentedly busy time at the moment. So, but do stay in touch and stay safe. And thank you again, LaFawn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much. My name's Leila Mackenzie-Dellis. You've been listening to the Diversity Inclusive Leaders podcast show. We're with you every week, but now twice weekly due to these unprecedented times. So look forward to seeing you very, very soon.
Thank you so much for watching the Diversity and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.